Welcome everyone to the Red Raider Report. I'm Zach Long. Today we're going to look at this week's slate in the Big 12 Conference. A handful of teams are off, but still there are some intriguing matchups that should have a lot of impact on the rest of the season. Let's get started first with the Thursday night game. Colorado visits West Virginia. Dan Hawkins and the Buffaloes got a big win 2 weeks ago against Wyoming. It broke an ugly two-game losing streak to start the season in which their defense, quite frankly, got shredded at Toledo on national television. Hawkins is going to go back with his son, who is coming back from a concussion. He did well 2 weeks ago against Wyoming, did not have a turnover, and their running back Rodney Stewart ran for 127 yards. That is some gains offensively for Colorado, but defensively I think is where the key is going to be in this game. West Virginia, they're coming off a tough road loss at Auburn 2 weeks ago, 41-30. Other than that, they've got two quality wins, and they've got a mobile quarterback in Jarrett Brown, as you've come to expect from West Virginia, and I think that's the key to the game. You saw on national television Colorado against Toledo get absolutely shredded by a somewhat mobile quarterback. I think that's going to be the key in this game, and the fact that it's at West Virginia, a little bit tough for what Colorado has shown so far this in the season. I expect West Virginia to win this game by at least a touchdown or more, and the tough season continue to roll on for Colorado and Dan Hawkins. Next, we'll move our attention to a Big 12 conference game. Kansas State, Iowa State open up their respective conference slates. They're going to play this game at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. A surprising start for Iowa State. I'll be the first to say I did not predict them to get off to this start, but they're off to a 3-1 start on the season. Impressive wins. Their only loss right now to an Iowa team, which we saw upset Penn State last week. So maybe a little bit more respect is due the way towards Iowa State. They can get off to a heck of a start in the Big 12 Conference slate with a win over Kansas State and go to 4-1 on the season. Kansas State, on the other hand, 2-2 under Bill Snyder in his re-return to college football. They gained a little bit of confidence last week with a win over Tennessee Tech, but before that, their offense has struggled. Brandon Banks, though, has been a highlight for Kansas State. Last week, he tied an NCAA Division I record with 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns in a game. The defense has done a solid job for Kansas State. The offense has just had trouble supporting them. Carson Kaufman, though, by his own accord this week, thinks he's becoming more confident in the offense and thinks they're going to be a little bit better. Iowa State, like I said, a surprising 3-1 on the season. The key to that, Austin Arnaud has done an outstanding job running Tom Herman's offense at Iowa State. They've also had a good running back. Alexander Robinson had a nice game last week, 127 yards in their win over Army. Arnaud's ability to run that offense and give a dual threat look will be very key in this game. Kansas State's defense has not gotten embarrassed this year. They just haven't had the offensive support to get it back. I think this is going to be a highly entertaining game, but I'm going to pick a mild upset here in maybe some people's minds. I'm going to pick Iowa State to go to Kansas City and beat Kansas State behind the performance of Austin Arnaud. In the case of the Baylor Bears, they got absolutely devastating news this week. Robert Griffin, their all-everything sophomore quarterback, hurt his knee. He's done for the year. This is, I mean, not to be overdramatic, but is an absolutely devastating loss. He was the key to the whole team, and his offensive ability was what a lot of people were hanging Baylor's abilities on to make a bowl this season. He's done. The situation doesn't get any better from there. His backup, Blake Szymanski, who has experience as a Big 12 starter, he is hurt as well, may not be able to go. They may have to go with a true freshman in Nick Florence this week against Kent State. The good news is it is Kent State. They're going to have to rely on their skill positions, Baylor. Their running backs and wide receivers, let a young quarterback have a chance to develop, let the running game carry this. Kent State is a team that lost to another Big 12 opponent, Iowa State, earlier this year. The key for Baylor, they can't fold up from this moment on in the season. They're off to a 2-1 start. If they fold up their tents right now and they mope around about the loss of Robert Griffin, they will easily not make a bowl this season. They can get a win here, go to 3-1, get some confidence before they go into the Big 12 slate. But like I said, losing Robert Griffin was absolutely monstrous. Baylor's ability to respond to those injuries, like several other teams across the country have been forced to do when star players have been hurt this year, that's going to be the key to whether we see Baylor in a bowl this season. Ultimately this week, I think they get it done behind their running backs and their wide receivers, and they'll beat Kent State 2-3-1 on the season. Next game on the schedule is an intriguing one. Texas A&M and Arkansas, they're playing this game at the Cowboy Stadium in Arlington. This is an absolutely monstrous game for both programs, and here's why. Texas A&M off to a 3-0 start on the season. They have not necessarily played a tough opponent yet, and they did surrender 30 points to Utah State the second game of the season. Solid win over a very bad New Mexico team, and they also contained a University of Alabama Birmingham team last week that has put up a lot of offensive numbers this year. Gerard Johnson and the offense have had these 3 games to develop confidence and develop their system a little bit better under Mike Sherman. The defense has been pretty good. Like I said, the 30 points to Utah State was about their only black mark, but they're going to get tested. Arkansas is an SEC team. They've played an extremely tough schedule to start the year. This is going to be a step up for A&M defensively, and they're going to have a big challenge with Arkansas. They got Ryan Mallett at quarterback. Bobby Petrino knows how to coach. Hasn't got off to a great start at Arkansas, and that's why this game is extremely big for them. Petrino can go to a hot recruiting base in Dallas, beat A&M close to their home area, and restore a lot of confidence in his ability with that Arkansas program. Their 2 losses this year, you have to understand, to ranked teams, Alabama and Georgia. Their schedule's been extremely tough. They've had a tougher road at this point than A&M has. A&M's going to get a step up in competition. Bobby Petrino needs this win in a big way, as does Mike Sherman. Mike Sherman wins this game in Dallas. He gets a lot of confidence behind him, starts the season 4-0, and people are really going to forget about the struggles that A&M had last season. Ultimately, though, an SEC team is a step up. We've watched Big 12 teams struggle against SEC teams consistently over the last year and a half. Ultimately, I think right here, A&M, this is an exciting game. I'm going to pick an upset, though. I think Arkansas goes into Arlington and upsets Texas A&M behind a strong performance of their defense. Now possibly the most exciting matchup this week in the Big 12 Conference. Oklahoma visits Miami. This is a game we looked at before the season as being extremely key. There's been some negative factors to deter from this over the past few weeks, but still a big game for both teams. In the case of Oklahoma, Sam Bradford, he is practicing this week. He is going to be a game-time decision. We're not going to know up until that point whether he's going to play or not. All going to depend on the soreness in that shoulder as he tries to go through full practices this week. If he's not ready to go, Landry Jones, the freshman redshirt from Artesia, New Mexico, will get the start. He's been solid over his 2 starts for Oklahoma. He got confident against Idaho State, and he had an absolutely outstanding performance against Tulsa 2 weeks ago. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for Miami. In the case of the Hurricanes, they're coming off a very embarrassing loss at Virginia Tech, 31-7. You saw a Virginia Tech defense absolutely exploit Miami offensively. They kept pressure on Ja'Cory Harris the whole game and caused a bunch of problems. That, for me, is the key. Oklahoma's defense has been outstanding over the last 2 weeks. Over 30 possessions without a touchdown scored against them. They shut out Tulsa, which is traditionally one of the better offenses in the country over the last few years. Virginia Tech's defensive line caused a lot of problems for Miami. If Miami's offensive line was unable to control that group, they are going to have a whole bunch of fun with Oklahoma. Led up front by Gerald McCoy, I think that's going to be the key to it. They will pressure Ja'Cory Harris more than he saw last week at Virginia Tech and cause the Hurricanes a bunch of problems. Miami will be ready. This is on their home field. It's an extremely tough place to play. But I think regardless of whether Sam Bradford or Landry Jones starts for Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma's defense is the key to this team. They go in, they shut Miami down, and the offense does enough to win this football game. Last game we're going to look at on the Big 12 slate, Texas Tech welcomes New Mexico. It has not been an exactly fun time for both these teams in the national media spotlight this week. Texas Tech, as we know, lost to Houston last week down there, and then afterwards, a whole bunch of things apparently went wrong. Brandon Carter, their senior offensive lineman and captain, suspended indefinitely after violation of team policy. Then, several players putting remarks on their Twitter accounts led to Mike Leach banning his players from using Twitter while playing for the Red Raiders. Those distractions aside, they're not quite as bad as what New Mexico's dealing with. Head coach Mike Locksley. It came out after a loss to Air Force 2 weeks ago. During a coaches meeting at some point, he allegedly punched one of his assistants, splitting their lip. He was reprimanded. He released a statement on it yesterday, but needless to say, there was a lot of bickering going on with New Mexico. They halfway blamed it on the fact that they're 0-4, not having a very good season. Not only are they 0-4, they're coming off a loss to their in-state rival, New Mexico State, for the first time in a good number of years. Needless to say, both teams will probably be extremely cranky this weekend. Unfortunately for New Mexico, Texas Tech's a lot more talented. I look for Texas Tech to respond very well after the loss to Houston. New Mexico has been outscored by their opponents this year, 142-46. I look for Taylor Potts to rebound, very strong against the Lobos, get his offensive weapons working, and I think they're going to work some kinks out in their system before they open Big 12 play in 2 weeks against Kansas State. Look for Texas Tech to roll big time in this game over New Mexico. That's going to wrap up our look at this week's games in the Big 12 Conference. For the Red Raider Report, I'm Zach Long.